The hidden shack. The forest at the edge of the village was always quiet at night, but that evening a man named Daniel noticed something strange, something that pulled his steps off the road. He carried a small basket of food in his hand, bread, dried meat, and a flask of water. At first he thought he was only hearing the sound of rain dripping from the trees, but then he heard it again, faint and trembling. A cough, a child's cough. Daniel slowed down. The sound came from an old wooden shack, half hidden behind vines and broken branches. Most people believed the place was empty, abandoned long ago. But Daniel knew better. He had seen shadows moving here before. Small ones. Desperate ones. Tonight he decided to find out who was inside. He pushed open the rotting door just enough to look. What he saw made him freeze. Inside, in the dim light of a broken lantern, sat an alien woman and a small girl. Their skin was pale with a faint glow, their clothes torn and dirty. The little girl lay curled against her mother's chest, shivering as if the cold had wrapped chains around her tiny body. The mother's sharp eyes turned toward Daniel, wide with fear. "Stay back," she whispered, her voice weak but filled with warning. She held her daughter tighter like a shield. Daniel didn't move closer. He only lifted the basket. "I brought food," he said softly. His tone was calm, not threatening, but the mother's eyes narrowed with suspicion. The girl, too weak to pretend, lifted her head. Her eyes, large and shining, looked at the basket. She didn't speak, but her hunger showed in the way she swallowed hard, her lips dry. The mother noticed her daughter's reaction and turned her face away, ashamed. "We don't need your charity," she said, though her voice cracked as she said it. Daniel stepped into the shack slowly, placing the basket on the floor between them. Then he stepped back again. "Take it if you want. I will not harm you." The girl tugged at her mother's sleeve, whispering something Daniel couldn't hear. Finally, the woman's trembling hand reached for the bread. She tore off a small piece, placed it in her daughter's hand, and watched as the child ate with a hunger that almost broke Daniel's heart. He stayed silent. He knew too many words could frighten them away. After a few minutes, the woman looked at him again. Her suspicion was still there, but there was something else now, confusion. "Why?" she asked. "Why would a human bring food to us?" Daniel didn't answer right away. He thought about the nights he had walked past this shack hearing whispers inside. He thought about how everyone in the village spoke of aliens as dangerous, untrustworthy, better left to die in the cold. But he couldn't forget the sound of the child's cough. He couldn't ignore it. "Because you need it," he said finally. His words were simple, but the weight behind them was heavy. The woman said nothing. She turned back to her daughter, brushing strands of tangled hair from the girl's forehead. The child smiled faintly now, her stomach no longer empty. Daniel took a step back toward the door. He knew if he stayed too long, she might chase him away. Before leaving, he placed another blanket from his shoulder on the floor near them. "The nights are colder now," he said, then left the shack without waiting for thanks. Outside, the wind carried the sound of his footsteps away. Inside, the alien woman stared at the food basket, her mind a storm of questions. Who was this human? Why did he care? Was it a trap? Her daughter, however, didn't think of traps or danger. She leaned against her mother's arm and whispered, "He is kind." The mother closed her eyes, torn between fear and a fragile thread of hope. That night, Daniel walked home under the shadow of the trees, but his thoughts stayed behind in the shack. He could still see the child's hungry eyes, still hear the mother's broken voice. He told himself he would not return, that this was only a one-time act of pity. Yet deep inside he already knew he could not ignore them. The next day at dawn, Daniel found himself preparing another basket. He packed bread, water, and a small piece of roasted meat. His hands moved on their own, as if his heart had already chosen a path his mind could not escape. As he stepped out of his door, he looked back at the village behind him. If anyone discovered what he was doing, there would be questions. People feared aliens, people hated them. If they found out he was helping an alien mother and child, they might turn against him too. But Daniel kept walking, each step heavier than the last. He told himself it was just for the child, just for her smile, just for the sound of her eating instead of coughing. The forest swallowed him again. The shack waited, hidden and silent. Inside, the alien mother held her daughter, close, whispering, "We must not trust humans, they always want something." Yet even as she said the words, her eyes betrayed her, because part of her wanted to believe in the man who had brought food without asking for anything. And when the door creaked open again, and Daniel's shadow fell across the broken floor, the little girl's face lit up with a small, fragile smile. For the first time in weeks, the shack didn't feel so empty. The daily visit. The morning sun filtered through the tall trees, painting golden lines across the forest floor. Daniel carried another basket of food in his hand. His steps were quiet, careful, as if he didn't want the world to know where he was going. His heart told him to turn back, yet his legs carried him forward. When he reached the shack, he paused. He could hear nothing inside. No cough, no whispers. For a moment, fear gripped him. What if they had left? What if someone else had found them? He pushed the door open slightly, and relief washed over him. The little alien girl sat cross-legged on the floor, trying to warm her hands against a faint spark of fire. Her mother sat behind her, watchful eyes fixed on the door. The girl's face brightened when she saw him. She jumped to her feet, almost stumbling. "Food!" she whispered to her mother with a spark of excitement. The mother's expression hardened, though Daniel could see the faintest trace of relief. She didn't speak as Daniel placed the basket down again. Inside it lay bread, a small jug of milk, and even an apple, something rare for him to share. The little girl reached for it eagerly, but her mother's hand caught hers mid-air. "Wait," she said. Her eyes narrowed at Daniel. "Why do you keep coming back?" Daniel didn't answer right away. He leaned against the wall, looking tired. "Because you need it," he said finally. "Because the child shouldn't starve." The girl pulled away gently and grabbed the apple. She bit into it, juice running down her chin, her eyes closing in pure joy. Daniel couldn't help but smile. "What's your name?" he asked softly. The girl hesitated, then looked at her mother. The woman gave a small shake of her head, warning her not to answer. But the girl whispered anyway, her voice small. "Lyra." Daniel repeated it quietly, as if testing the sound. "Lyra. That's a beautiful name." The mother's eyes darkened. "Do not speak it aloud. If others hear, it will bring danger." He nodded. "Then only I will know it." For the first time, silence settled between them, not the silence of fear, but something softer, almost like fragile trust. Over the next few days, Daniel kept returning. Every morning or evening, his footsteps found the same hidden path. Each time he brought food, sometimes even a blanket, sometimes firewood. At first, the mother barely looked at him. She only allowed her daughter to eat and then ordered him to leave. But Lyra changed everything. She began to wait by the door, her eyes shining whenever he arrived. She started talking in small bursts, telling him how cold the nights were, how she dreamed of eating warm soup again, how the stars looked brighter in her home world. Daniel listened to every word, his heart twisting each time. One evening, as he set the basket down, Lyra suddenly asked, "Why are you kind to us?" Her mother's sharp voice cut in, "Lyra, stop." But the child didn't stop. Her wide eyes locked on Daniel. "Other humans, they throw stones when they see us. They shout. Why don't you?" Daniel knelt down so his eyes met hers. His voice was quiet but firm. "Because I see you are just a child, and children deserve kindness." The girl's face glowed with a smile so pure it almost hurt to see. Her mother looked away, pretending not to hear. But her hands, usually tense, loosened their grip around her daughter. That night, after Daniel left, the mother whispered to herself, "Humans never help for free." He will want something one day. Her voice shook, not with anger but with fear. She had lost too much already to believe in mercy. Yet when Lyra curled up against her and whispered, "He makes me feel safe," the mother didn't answer. She only stared at the basket of food, knowing tomorrow he would return again. Days stretched into a week. Each visit carried a mix of relief and danger. Daniel knew that if the villagers discovered what he was doing, they might call him a traitor. Helping aliens was not just frowned upon, it was forbidden. Yet each time he saw Lyra's thin arms and hollow cheeks, he knew he could never stop. One afternoon, as he was leaving the shack, Daniel noticed footprints outside. Not his, not theirs. Someone else had walked close by. His chest tightened. He didn't tell them, but his mind screamed with warning. That night, as he lay in his bed, he couldn't sleep. Images of the mother and daughter filled his thoughts. The child smiling, the mother's eyes full of doubt, the strange footprints in the mud. He clenched his fists. He had promised nothing, yet his heart whispered a promise anyway. He would protect them. The next morning, when he arrived again, Lyra rushed to greet him, holding a small flower in her hand. She pressed it into his palm shyly. "For you," she said. It was nothing but a wild flower, yet Daniel felt as if she had handed him a priceless treasure. He tucked it into his pocket carefully. The mother watched silently. Something in her eyes had changed. The walls of distrust were still there, but cracks had begun to show. As Daniel turned to leave, he glanced back at them, mother and daughter huddled together in the dim light. He whispered under his breath, words only the forest heard. "This can't go on forever. One day, I will have to do more." And with that thought heavy in his chest, he disappeared into the trees, leaving behind not just food, but a fragile bond that grew stronger each day. The village was never truly quiet. Even in the evenings, when the sun sank behind the hills, voices carried through the narrow streets. People gossiped, they whispered. They always looked for trouble in places it didn't belong. Daniel heard it first while trading at the market. Two men stood near the well, speaking in low voices, but not low enough. "Something's out there," one man muttered, spitting on the ground. "Tracks near the woods, too small for a beast, too strange for a villager." The other man's brow furrowed. "Aliens, maybe. You know how they crawl into abandoned places, like rats." Daniel forced himself not to react. He kept his eyes on the vegetables he was buying, but his hand tightened around the basket handle. His mind raced. The footprints. They had noticed. He walked home with his heart heavy. If the villagers started looking into the forest, they would find the shack. They would find her. They would find Lyra. That night, Daniel couldn't sleep. The voices replayed in his head, sharper each time. He had promised himself he would protect them, but how could he protect them from an entire village? The next morning, he carried food again. But this time his steps were faster, his eyes scanning the ground for new footprints. When he reached the shack, he knocked softly before entering. Inside, the mother sat with Lyra on her lap. The girl's laughter filled the air, light and innocent, as she played with a ragged doll made of cloth scraps. For a moment, Daniel forgot the danger. For a moment, it felt like family. But then the mother's eyes caught his. She saw the tension in his face. "Something is wrong," she said immediately. Daniel placed the basket down. "The villagers are talking. They suspect someone is hiding in the woods. I fear they may come searching." The mother froze, her hand gripping Lyra protectively. The little girl looked up, confused. "What does that mean?" "It means," the mother whispered, her voice tight, "we may not be safe here much longer." Lyra's face fell. "But I like it here. He comes every day." She pointed at Daniel with a small smile, as if that alone was proof everything would be fine. Daniel knelt beside her. "I'll keep coming, I'll keep bringing food, but you must be careful if anyone sees you." He stopped, unable to finish the thought. The mother's sharp gaze pierced him. "Why do you risk yourself for us? If they catch you helping, they will turn against you too." Daniel looked at her. The firelight painted her face in shadows, her tired eyes watching him like a predator cornered but too weak to fight. He didn't know how to explain it. He only said, "Because it's the right thing." The silence after his words was heavy, filled with unspoken fears. Later that evening, as Daniel prepared to leave, the mother caught his sleeve for the first time. Her grip was firm, almost desperate. "If danger comes, you must not be here. They will punish you for our sake. Do not tie your fate to ours." Daniel didn't answer. He simply looked down at her hand on his sleeve, then at Lyra's small face watching him with trusting eyes. And in that moment he knew, no matter what she said, he would never walk away. Days passed. The whispers in the village grew louder. A hunter claimed he had seen smoke from the forest. Another said he heard strange voices. Some men began sharpening blades, planning to clean out whatever hides there. Daniel felt time slipping away. Each visit to the shack felt shorter, more dangerous. He began taking longer paths, circling around to hide his trail. But still, he feared it wasn't enough. One afternoon, he arrived to find Lyra waiting outside, her small feet muddy, her eyes bright with excitement. "You came," she said, running to him. She clutched his hand tightly. "Lyra," he whispered, pulling her inside quickly. "You mustn't wait outside. It's not safe." She pouted, but obeyed. The mother scolded her, but her own hands were shaking. She had heard the whispers too, carried by the wind through the trees. That night, the storm returned. Rain pounded the shack and the roof leaked. Daniel stayed longer, helping patch holes with scraps of wood. As thunder shook the ground, Lyra fell asleep beside the fire, her head resting on Daniel's leg. The mother watched silently. She had told herself again and again not to trust him. But as she saw her daughter's peaceful face, she whispered words she never meant to say. "If they find us, will you stand with us?" Daniel's eyes met hers. He didn't hesitate. "Yes." Outside, the storm raged, drowning the world in darkness. Inside, 3 lives shared the flickering light of one small fire, clinging to a fragile bond that might soon be tested by the weight of the village's wrath. And far away, in the market, men still whispered, "Something's in those woods. We'll find it. We'll burn it out." The hunt was drawing near, the stormy night. The sky turned black long before night fell. Heavy clouds rolled in from the hills, thick and dark like a curtain. Daniel knew a storm was coming, but he didn't expect it to be this fierce. The wind screamed through the trees, bending branches and shaking leaves like a beast clawing at the forest. He gripped the basket tighter in his hands as rain began to fall. It was cold and sharp, hitting his face like stones. Most villagers had locked themselves inside their homes, but Daniel was running toward the woods, toward the hidden shack. His boots sank into mud. Water splashed around his legs. Every step felt heavier, but he kept going. The storm roared louder, and inside his chest another storm raged, a fear that the fragile shack might not survive the night. When he reached the clearing, his heart almost stopped. The shack shook with every blast of wind. The roof tiles clattered, and rain poured through the broken wood. Through the cracks he saw a flicker of fire, weak and dying. Daniel pushed the door open, nearly torn from its hinges by the wind. Inside, chaos ruled. Water dripped everywhere, pooling on the floor. Lyra clung to her mother, shivering and crying. The mother held her close, but her own arms trembled with exhaustion. "Daniel!" Lyra cried when she saw him, her voice breaking. Through the storm's roar, he rushed forward, dropping the basket. The little girl ran into his arms, her body cold as ice. He wrapped her in his coat, then turned to the mother. "The roof won't last," he said over the thunder. "We need to hold it together." The mother shook her head. "This place, it will fall." Her voice cracked between fear and despair. But Daniel didn't listen. He grabbed broken planks and pressed them against the shaking roof, forcing it back into place. Rain hammered down on him, soaking his clothes, but he kept pushing, his arms straining. "Bring me the rope," he shouted. The mother hesitated. For so long she had doubted him, feared his kindness. But now, seeing him fight the storm for them, something inside her broke. She pulled a piece of rope from the corner and handed it to him. Their hands touched briefly, cold, wet, trembling, but in that touch was something unspoken. Together, they tied the planks, forcing the roof to stay. The wind screamed. Lightning flashed across the sky, but the shack stood. Lyra peeked from under Daniel's coat, her small face lit by the dim fire. "Are we safe?" she whispered. Daniel looked at her, his chest rising and falling with heavy breaths. "For now," he said softly. The storm raged on through the night. Daniel stayed inside, kneeling by the door with one hand pressed against the wall, ready to stop it from tearing apart. The mother sat near the fire, holding Lyra tightly, her eyes never leaving Daniel. Hours passed like years. The storm seemed endless, but slowly, little by little, the roar softened. The rain eased. By dawn, only the sound of dripping water remained. Daniel collapsed onto the floor, exhausted. His arms shook from holding the roof all night. His body ached, but he forced himself to sit up when he saw Lyra stirring. The little girl crawled to him and hugged him tightly. "You stayed," she whispered. "You didn't leave us." Daniel placed a gentle hand on her head. "I told you I won't." The mother's eyes filled with tears, though she quickly turned away to hide them. She had seen many humans in her life, but none had risked themselves for her and her child. None had stood against a storm for them. She spoke quietly, her voice softer than before. "Why do you do this? Why suffer with us?" Daniel looked at her. His face was pale, his hair wet, his hands blistered from pulling rope in the rain. Yet his eyes were steady. "Because no one deserves to face the storm alone." The words hung in the air like a promise. For the first time, the mother didn't argue. She didn't warn him to stay away. Instead, she lowered her gaze and whispered, "Thank you." It was a small thing, but to Daniel, it meant more than any treasure. He left later that morning, tired but determined. The villagers would soon notice the storm damage. They might come to check the woods. He knew danger was closer than ever. As he walked away, Lyra waved from the broken door. "Come back tomorrow," she called, her voice full of hope. Daniel smiled faintly, raising a hand in return. Behind him, the sun broke through the clouds, golden light spilling over the wet forest. But in the distance, far back in the village, darker clouds still gathered, not from the sky but from the whispers of men who searched for something to blame. And Daniel knew the real storm had not yet passed. The confrontation, for days after. The storm. Daniel moved like a man with two lives. By daylight, he worked in the village, selling grain and chopping wood. By night, he carried food and firewood into the forest, returning always with mud on his boots and worry in his heart. But whispers had grown louder. The storm had shaken the forest, and hunters noticed signs of life near the abandoned shack. Footprints too small for Daniel. Smoke that wasn't his. One evening, while Daniel filled his basket in the market, he overheard a group of men near the blacksmith's forge. "Something's out there," one said, sharpening his blade. "Tracks. Smoke. I tell you, it's aliens. Dirty strays hiding where they don't belong." Another spat. "Then let's drag them out, sell them to the traders. Better they fill our pockets than waste food." Daniel kept his face calm, but inside, dread coiled like a snake. They were close. Too close. That night he rushed to the shack, his steps fast, his breath short. When he entered, Lyra ran to him with her usual bright smile, clutching the little flower he had once tucked into his pocket. But Daniel's eyes went straight to her mother. "They know," he said in a hushed voice. "The villagers are searching. They may come here." The mother's face drained of color. She pulled Lyra close to her side, her hand gripping the girl's shoulder. "We must run," she whispered. "We must leave tonight." Daniel shook his head. The forest is watched. If you move now, they will see. You must stay hidden until I can think of something. The mother's eyes blazed with fear and anger. You risk too much already. Why do you not let us go? If they find us here with you, they will destroy you too. Before Daniel could answer, voices echoed outside. Heavy boots on wet ground. Torches flickered through the cracks in the shack. Lyra gasped and clutched her mother's dress. "They're here," she whispered. Daniel's jaw tightened. He stood and moved to the door, placing himself between the villagers and the small family behind him. The door banged open before he could touch it. 3 men entered, their faces hard, their eyes gleaming with suspicion. The tallest one, Garrick, held a torch in one hand and an axe in the other. "What's this, Daniel?" Garrick sneered, scanning the dim shack. "We've seen smoke, heard voices. You hiding something?" Daniel's voice was steady, though his heart pounded. "It's just me. I sometimes come here to rest when I work in the forest." The second man stepped forward, his eyes narrowing. "Strange, then, how the footprints are too small for you, and this place smells of food and fire. You expect us to believe you live here like a beggar?" Daniel spread his arms slightly, blocking their view of the corner where the mother and child huddled in shadow. "What I do here is my own concern. There's nothing for you to take." Garrick's eyes glittered. He pushed Daniel aside roughly, raising the torch high. The light spilled across the shack and caught the glimmer of pale skin. The mother gasped. Lyra whimpered, burying her face in her mother's chest. "There!" Garrick roared. "Aliens!" The men surged forward, but Daniel shoved Garrick back, his voice sharp. "Leave them!" The men froze, shocked. Garrick snarled. "You protect them? You've lost your mind. They are property. They belong to the traders." "Not to you," Daniel snapped. His body trembled with rage, but his stance was firm. "They are not beasts. They are not property. They are a mother and child." The torchlight flickered across their faces. For a long moment, no one moved. The storm outside had ended days ago, but inside the shack, another storm now raged. Finally, one of the men laughed bitterly. "You'd risk your life for them? For creatures who don't belong here?" Daniel's voice lowered, but every word struck like a hammer. "They belong as much as we do. More than you, if all you see is gold." In their suffering, Garrick's eyes narrowed to slits. He spat on the floor. "You'll regret this, Daniel, you and your pets." With that, he signaled the others. They backed out, muttering threats, their torches casting angry light across the trees. When they were gone, silence pressed heavy in the shack. Daniel turned slowly. The mother's eyes were wide, shining with shock. Lyra peeked from her arms, her face pale with fear. "You stood for us," the mother whispered, her voice trembling. She looked as if she couldn't believe what she had seen. Daniel rubbed his bruised shoulder where Garrick had shoved him. His voice was tired, but strong. "I told you. I will not let them hurt you." The mother lowered her gaze, torn between fear and something deeper. Gratitude, perhaps. Or trust. She held her daughter tighter and whispered words only Daniel could hear. "You are a fool, but a brave fool." Daniel allowed himself a small smile. He knew the danger was not over. The confrontation had only bought them time. But in that moment, as the fire crackled and the night stretched on, he also knew one thing for certain. He could never walk away now. Because when the men shouted aliens, Daniel had seen only a mother fighting to protect her child. And he knew that fight was now his too, the breaking point. The night after the villagers came was the heaviest Daniel had ever known. The shack felt smaller, as if the walls themselves were closing in. The fire burned low, crackling softly, but no one spoke. Lyra lay curled against her mother, her small breaths uneven, her face pale from fear. She clutched Daniel's coat like a shield, unwilling to let go. Her mother sat stiff and silent, eyes fixed on the flames. But inside she was shaking. Daniel sat near the door, his back against the wall. listening to every sound outside. Every crack of a branch, every call of the night wind made his hand twitch toward the small knife at his belt. He knew Garrick and the others would not stay silent for long. They would return. Finally, the silence broke. The mother's voice cut through the air, sharp but trembling. "This cannot go on," she whispered. Daniel turned his head. "What do you mean?" She faced him, her eyes glistening in the firelight. "You risk your life for us, but it will cost you everything. The villagers already hate us, they will hate you too, and when they come again they will not leave." Daniel's jaw tightened. "Then let them come. I will stand between them and you." Her breath shook as anger mixed with despair. "Why? Why do you care? We are not your kind. We are nothing to you." Lyra stirred, woken by her mother's raised voice. She sat up, confused, clutching her ragged doll. "Mama?" she whispered. The mother's hands trembled as she held her daughter close. Her voice cracked now, the anger slipping into raw fear. "I cannot lose her, Daniel, I cannot." Daniel's chest ached at the sight of her breaking. He moved closer, speaking softly but firmly. "You will not lose her. Not while I live." Her eyes flashed with tears. "You cannot promise that. I have seen men promise before. They take, they betray, they leave us in chains." Her voice broke completely and she buried her face in Lyra's hair. "I cannot let it happen again. I would rather die here than see her taken." Lyra's small hands patted her mother's face, whispering, "Don't cry, Mama, please don't cry." Daniel knelt down beside them, lowering himself to their level. His voice was steady, though his own heart trembled. "Listen to me. I am not like them. I don't see you as less. I don't see you as aliens. I see a mother, and I see a child. And I will fight for you even if it means fighting the whole village." The mother looked up, her face streaked with tears. She searched his eyes, desperate for a lie, for a crack in his words. But she found none. His gaze was steady, unflinching. For the first time, her defenses cracked completely. She whispered, almost to herself, "Why are you doing this?" Daniel's answer came quiet but with weight. "Because it's right, and because I can't stand by and watch you suffer." The mother's breath caught. She turned away, ashamed of her own tears, but her voice softened. "You will destroy yourself." "Maybe," Daniel admitted, "but better me than you." The fire flickered, throwing shadows across their faces. Lyra rested her head on Daniel's shoulder now, her small body trembling less. She trusted him, fully without question. The mother saw it, and something inside her shifted. For so long she had carried everything alone: fear, hunger, despair. Now, for the first time, she felt the weight ease just a little. But before peace could settle, heavy steps crunched in the distance. Daniel froze, listening. Torches glimmered faintly between the trees. Voices carried through the wind. The villagers were back. "Search the forest," Garrick's rough voice called. "We'll find the beast tonight." The mother clutched Lyra tight, panic rising in her chest. "They're here. They'll take her." Daniel grabbed his knife, standing tall. "No, they'll have to go through me first." Lyra's eyes widened with fear. She tugged on his sleeve. "Don't leave us, Daniel. Please don't." He looked down at her, his expression fierce but gentle. "I won't, I swear it." The mother's heart hammered. She saw him standing there, weapon in hand, ready to face men who would kill him without hesitation. For them. For her. For her child. She felt her own strength break like glass. Tears ran freely as she whispered, "Then we are already bound to you, whether I want it or not." Outside, the footsteps grew louder. Torches swayed. The night carried, the promise of violence. Inside the shack, Daniel stood like a wall, his knife glinting in the firelight, his body ready to shield them. The mother pressed her forehead against her daughter's, whispering, "Hold tight, my little one." And Lyra, small and trembling but full of trust, whispered back, "Daniel will keep us safe." The breaking point had come. The torches outside flickered through the cracks of the shack. Heavy footsteps circled closer, voices low but sharp. Garrick's growl carried through the night. They're inside. I can smell the fire. Break the door. The mother held Lyra tightly, her arms trembling, her eyes filled with despair. Lyra pressed her face into her chest, whispering Daniel's name over and over like a prayer. Daniel stood by the door, his knife gripped firmly in his hand. The small blade looked useless against three men with axes and torches, but his eyes held something stronger than steel. The door rattled as fists pounded against it. Daniel's voice cut through the chaos. "Enough," he shouted. His words echoed like thunder. "If you want them, you'll have to kill me first." Silence followed. The men outside muttered, uncertain. Garrick barked a laugh. "Then so be it. One fool against three." The mother gasped, but Daniel did not move from the door. His stance was steady, his body blocking the way. For the first time in years, someone stood for them, truly stood. Before the men could strike again, another voice called from the distance, an elder villager. "Back off, Garrick. Not tonight. You'll set the whole forest on fire." There was anger, argument, and finally the sound of retreating boots. Garrick spat one last threat before disappearing into the dark. "This isn't over, Daniel. You've chosen your side. You'll regret it." Slowly, the night grew quiet again. The torches faded into the distance. The forest returned to silence, but inside the shack, hearts still pounded like drums. Daniel lowered his knife. His shoulders sagged with exhaustion, but his face burned with resolve. He turned toward the mother and daughter. Lyra ran to him first, tears streaking her cheeks. She hugged his leg tightly. "I knew you wouldn't let them. Take us." Daniel bent down and pulled her into his arms. She clung to him, trembling but safe. The mother stared at him, her breath uneven. For days she had fought to keep walls around her heart, to believe no human could ever truly care. But now those walls lay broken. Her voice shook. "You stood against your own people. For us." Daniel met her gaze. His voice was low but steady. "I told you before. I don't see you as less. I don't see you as property. I see family." Her lips parted, but no words came. Only tears. She had carried fear for so long, she didn't remember what hope felt like. Daniel placed Lyra gently back beside her. He crouched down so he was eye level with both of them. The firelight flickered across his face, tired but unyielding. "You cannot stay here anymore," he said firmly. "The villagers will come again, and next time, I may not be enough." The mother held her daughter close, her voice trembling. "Then what choice do we have? If we leave, we will be hunted. If we stay, we will be taken. There is nowhere left." Daniel took a deep breath. For days, the thought had haunted him. For nights, he had argued with himself. But now the decision was clear. "There is one place," he said quietly. "My home." The mother's eyes widened. "Your home?" "No. They would know. They would find us faster." He shook his head. "I live on the edge of the village." "No, one comes there. It is stronger than this shack, safer. If you stay here, you will die. If you come with me." He paused, his voice softening. "You may live." The words hung in the air, heavy and impossible. The mother looked down at Lyra, who clutched Daniel's sleeve with wide, hopeful eyes. "Mama, can we?" the girl whispered. Tears blurred the mother's vision. She wanted to protect her daughter. She wanted to run far away. But she also wanted what she hadn't dared to hope for: safety, warmth, a chance to live without fear. Daniel reached out, not touching them yet, but offering his hand. His voice was steady, filled with a quiet strength. "Come, live with me." The mother's breath caught. She searched his face for any sign of lies, any hint of selfishness. But she found only truth, only determination, only kindness. Lyra tugged at her sleeve, smiling through tears. "Please, Mama, with him we'll be safe." The mother's heart broke and healed in the same moment. Slowly, with trembling fingers, she placed her hand in Daniel's. His hand closed around hers firmly, steadying her shaking. Daniel pulled her gently to her feet. He looked at both of them, the tired mother, the hopeful child, and nodded. Then it settled. From this night on, you're not alone anymore. For the first time in years, the mother let herself believe it. She whispered, almost too soft to hear, "Thank you." Daniel smiled faintly. "No need. Just be ready. Tomorrow we leave this shack behind." The fire burned low, but inside, their hearts, something new was lit, something brighter than fear. That night, as Lyra slept curled between them, the mother sat awake, watching Daniel by the fire. His eyes stayed alert, his knife near, guarding them still. And for the first time she felt a strange peace. Perhaps foolish, perhaps dangerous, but real. The storm of whispers and hatred still waited outside. But inside this fragile shack, a promise had been made. A human had said, "Come live with me," and she had chosen to believe.